Okay, well, I think maybe we'll just start to get rolling here. And if more folks join as we get going, we can circle back if we have to. But I think it's good to get started here. Thanks everybody for coming. This is our second Q&A session that we're doing. Uh, we're with Family, which is we're a text-based chronic care management solution. But what we wanted to do is sort of start a sort of weekly session where we do a Q&A where we answer people's CCM questions and talk about CCM implementation. Some of you were with us last week or had to rain check. So really appreciate everyone for week 2. We're sort of giving this a shot. It's still an experiment in the making. But just to sort of say up top, we want this to be an informational session for you. We want, to answer your questions. We want to be able to hear from you about what your challenges are and sort of talk about what we've seen work at practices and health systems all throughout the country. So we want you to get the most out of this. So we're going to do a few poll questions. But there's also, if you'll see on your screen towards the bottom there, I believe it'll say that there's a Q&A button. If you have a question that you want to put in there, just type it in, enter it, and that'll pop up for us, and we'll try to answer it here. So first, I want to start off with introductions. I'm Ben. I'm sort of hosting this little Q&A, marketing manager here at Family, and I want to introduce Ishan and let him talk about himself real quick.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time. My name is Ishan Gildial. I'm the Director of Account Management and Customer Success here at Family. I've been fortunate enough to work with the organization going on about 4.5 years now. And I've been with us for the majority of our scaling of the account management and customer success function. Through my tenure here, I've had the opportunity to work on the sales side, the ops side, finance side of, I've kind of seen it all. But really my responsibility is to partner with all of our clients, regardless of size, anywhere from single provider, groups in rural parts of the country, all the way up to large enterprise health systems and densely populated urban areas and everybody in between. So I'm really excited to talk with you, to hear about the questions that you all have and to share some insights on how we might be able to help, or just generally how you can implement CCM at scale at your group.
So, thank you so much. And Stuart, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, to secondary follow up on what Ishan said, we're definitely happy to have everyone on this. This is a new experiment for us, and we definitely want to, keep it casual. My name is Stuart Tarnowski. I am based out of Chicago. However, I do travel and meet with clinics around the country. I've been with the organization for a little over a year. I'm an account executive, and I work with clinics, all different sorts of clinics, from primary care to specialty groups, FQHC, RHCs, home visits, and everything from single providers up to 99 providers. So a little bit of everything. And I'm also involved throughout the entire process. So everything from initial phone calls, discovery, implementation, enrollment, plan execution, goal planning, problem solving, et cetera. So we're very hands-on here at Family, and look forward to hearing your questions.
Yeah, so that's a great segue into, we just want to find out a little more about the folks that are here. So if you could open up your chat function real quick, and if you just type in where you're from, like where you're working out of, and sort of what your job and role is at your organization, and if you want to put something in there too about what project are you working on that brought you here today. So we got Catherine, who's a nurse practitioner in Pittsburgh. We got anybody else? Steelers. Go Steelers.
Go Steelers. Sorry.
Anybody else? You want to say where you're from or you're working out of? Derek's out of Brooklyn. I lived in Brooklyn for about 10 years. I moved out of there about a year ago.
Spent a little time in Bushwick. I didn't know that.
Oh, there you go. We've got Sam, who's a CCM co-coordinator from the Sugar Land area, Texas. Shri from the Bay Area. Thank you, Shri.
Nice.
Say what?
Saying we're covering north, south, east, and west.
I know we got the whole whole country here. So, and got a health coach out of Sacramento, Coleman. Cool. So to that, just to sort of open things up and just get a sense of where everybody's at. We're going to launch a poll question here that asks about how familiar you are with CCM, just so that we can have a sense of where everybody is in the group. Well, Alan says he's from Jacksonville, moving practices. Very cool. So I'm going to launch this poll question, and it'll just give us a sense of, is everyone here really familiar with CCM, just starting, so we can kind of be sure to give information that'll be useful to you. So just if you see the poll question pop up there, if you just want to answer it real quick. Not anymore. Okay. And all right. So we've got about half of everyone here is currently doing CCM. We got a couple of folks who are planning to do it, and one person who's just learning. So it's good to know. Sort of helps us get a sense. So I think at this point, we want to just open it up for the Q&A. If you see it down at the bottom, there's the Q&A section. If you want to type if there's a question you have, a challenge that you're seeing with CCM specifically, or, we can just kind of start walking through challenges. But if there's a specific question someone has, we want to open that up right off the bat here and see if there's something we can answer. We don't have any questions. Nobody have a specific question they want? That's fine if you don't. I just wanted to give you an opportunity here. Well, Sam asks, how urgent is making the care plan? So how soon should it be on file? So that's a good opportunity to talk about care plans there. Does someone, Ishan, do you want to talk about care plans?
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. And so I think the question really depends on one thing in particular, right? Are you billing the G0506 initiating visit G code add-on, right? So are you stating that the provider is going above and beyond the standard scope of their E&M visit to create a plan of care for that patient, outline goals, and get them enrolled? Or are you doing care planning as a part of care management and program initiation? Let's start with the first, right? So in the event that you build a G code, we recommend you have that care plan created and shared with the patient as quickly as possible following that visit. And, in our case, we try to make it kind of the same day. If it is a visit-based enrollment patient, as we call it, no later than about 48 hours after. And again, the idea there is the provider is the one that is really outlining that patient's plan of care and going through goal planning with that patient during their E&M visit. You need to get that plan of care created as quickly as possible to justify that activity in that billing event. The second option is if you do it as part of care management, right, where a team member under the general supervision of the provider and based on that provider's notes and recent history with the patient, that team member creates or scribes that care plan using the information that the provider has already shared with them. In that case, you simply have to have that care plan complete prior to billing for that patient, because as you know, care planning and having a care plan created and shared with that patient is a minimum compliance requirement for the program. So again, it really depends. Are you billing the G code or are you not? If you are, as soon as possible, ideally within 24 hours, no later than 48. If you're not, you do have a little bit more lenience, but you need to make sure you get that built and shared with the patient prior to billing them for CCM in their first month.
Ishan, could you talk a little bit about how the care plan is tied to the G code G0506 and how that is billed a little separately? That I would say when I'm meeting with clinics, it's probably one of the biggest questions I get, and just a lot of confusion around how that is actually billed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for purposes of today, and if we need to, I'm happy to go into more detail later on in the discussion. The G0506 code is probably one of the more underutilized codes within the CCM program set, and there are a variety of reasons why. First is just because it's not very clear in the guidelines regarding what needs to happen during the visit. Second is putting the ownership of care plan creation on a provider during a visit becomes very tough, right? So oftentimes it's simply skipped. So on our end, and when you work with us, what we provide is a very simple prescription form that allows the provider to outline their clinical decision-making for program enrollment, goal creation, chronic disease assignment, and then specifically the patient's plan of care that will be maintained with their care manager in a very, very simple, straightforward sheet that almost any provider would be familiar with and comfortable with filling out. Really what the G code signifies is that the provider themselves, the billing practitioner, is going above and beyond the standard scope of whatever E&M code they're billing for that patient. So as an example, if you bill a 99212, your time that you spend doing care planning above and beyond that standard 99212 is pretty easy to justify, right? Because you're billing a relatively non-complex code. The time that you go above and beyond for the care planning time is easily understood. As an example, if you were to bill a 99215, it becomes harder to justify that you are spending time above and beyond what you would typically do in that E&M visit. So again, really that G code, what it's saying technically is the provider themselves is going above the traditional scope of whatever E&M visit they're participating in, and that activity is leading to the creation of a patient's care plan based on that provider's decision making. Stuart, did that help to answer your question there?
Yeah, it does. I guess the one thing I would just add is that the G code is tied to, just to be really clear, it's tied to a visit and it's billed tied to an E&M visit. So it's billed separately than other CCM codes, which are per patient per month, like 99490, 99439, things like that. So that was just a little bit of a clarification there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because we do hear that a lot. Shri asks about what are some examples of care plans. I know that we sort of use a template system, but do you guys want to talk about that?
I can start it off, and Isha might want to jump in here. But I mean, there's various ways of doing care planning. Typically what I would say challenges that I hear from clinics is that care planning is probably their least favorite part of doing CCM. And it's simply because of the amount of time it could take to build out a care plan. If you don't have some sort of template and you have to build it from scratch, I've even seen clinics who try to build out their own templates and have put a lot of work into that. But the challenge is there is, I mean, it's just a lot of work. We'll hear, I'll say, anywhere from like 15 to like 40 minutes, one care plan could take for someone to build out. And when you have hundreds, maybe even thousands of patients enrolled in a program, you can see where the scalability immediately becomes a challenge. So I definitely recommend, I mean, we utilize templates that are very detailed and not a lot of work for the care manager to do. We'll typically see less than 10 minutes for one care plan. But even if you're using, you know, some other sort of software, I would definitely look and make sure that you guys have templates. On top of that, the types of care plans really it ties to the conditions that they have. So if a patient has diabetes and hypertension, then that care plan is going to be around those two chronic conditions. They might have more than those two chronic conditions, right? They might have 5. The idea of care planning, though, is really the core of what CCM is. You build out a plan of care for the patient, and then you update it over time as that changes, and then you share that with the patient. That's really the core of what CCM is. I will say a common mistake that I hear as well is they're not counting the time that it takes to build out a care plan or update a care plan for CCM. That is billable time under 99490, which is the getting over the 20-minute hurdle so that you could bill for that. Not sure if there's anything Ishan wanted to add there.
No, I think, Sri, just to answer your question from a more technical sense, CMS and their guidelines regarding CCM that they provide in their documentation is that a comprehensive care plan is centered around the active conditions that you all are managing and focusing on, but it's comprehensive in nature, and it allows for patient-centered goals, right? So as an example, these plans of care usually contain things like a problem list. You're going to have specific symptoms and vitals that need to be managed and monitored. You need to have specific measurable treatment goals, right? So as an example, what we recommend our clients do is every month, they request goals from their patient based on a review of the prior month's activity, right? What did you do well last month? What can we help you with this month? And oftentimes those are then turned into measurable goals, right? So as an example, it might be reduce my weight by 5 pounds from 165 pounds to 160, as an example, something that shows progress over time. Other things that care plans oftentimes are required to have are things like escalation processes and protocols, medication schedules, lifestyle recommendations, as well as appointment scheduling requirements across the entire continuum of that patient's care. Even if, for example, it's not just with you as their primary care provider or their pain specialist, et cetera. A major part of care planning is equipping the patient with the knowledge that they need to understand their full spectrum of care, while simultaneously providing a guidebook, if you will, for the care managers that are going to be actively managing that patient's health month over month.
Yeah, gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So I also wanted to note if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask, just like not typing them out, but just like ask on the live here, just through your microphone. Just if you press the raise hand function that's on the bottom of your screen, then I can allow you to talk, and you can just ask us live here. So I should have said that up top, but that's another way that we can take questions here. We have a couple more questions in here. I guess I want to just talk briefly here and just like go over a little bit these challenges we see just real quick for a couple minutes, just to make sure that we cover some of the broad stuff. I mean, I really love the specific questions that people are bringing here, and I think that everybody here, like half of the people here are currently doing CCM. But just to make sure that so the folks who are planning to sort of get a sense of what we see as the challenges when you're just getting started. We've sort of identified, based on what we've seen, these 4 challenges, which are speed, scale, sustainability, and quality. So speed, that's how fast you get your program up and running. Sorry, Stuart.
Oh, so I could take the first two to just speak to a little bit more, and then I'll let Ishan jump on the second two.
Yeah.
So when you look at CMS, if you go read their guidebooks and so forth, you'll hear directly from them that the average care manager can manage 48 patients. Now, being on the front lines, working with clinics a ton, I'll see above that sometimes, but the top is probably somewhere around 100, 125 for one care manager. And usually those conversations are, I'm extremely overworked, right? The care managers working 12 hours a day. Like we can't grow it beyond this, right? There's, but we have so many more patients that we would like to enroll because we want to help out more patients, right? So just kind of becomes a challenge in terms of scale and speed. And without going too in depth in terms of like what we're doing and so forth, so I want to just kind of keep this open. You got to think about ways to scope beyond the traditional phone call model. When most of CCM traditionally has been based on take an MA, take a nurse, right? Here's a list of patients, and we're going to make hundreds, if not thousands of phone calls over the course of the month, depending on how many patients we have enrolled. The problem with that is you're just trying to catch a patient out the blue, right? When you don't know when they're available, you don't know if, the content that you're going to be speaking to when you reach out to them, what to talk about, coming up with scripts, things like that. So we want to think of proactive management beyond just phone calling. With us, we're creating content that is patient and condition specific, and we're sending out check messages that we create the content for our clients. But there are also other ways to do outreach, from emailing, right? You guys could put together some sort of text program. It's just kind of thinking outside the box in a way that's going to be most beneficial to the patients. And the idea isn't just to get to 20 minutes. Yes, from a reimbursement point, like I get that, but we also want to be providing improved care for the patients. We want to be able to predict outcomes. We want to keep them out of the hospital and going to the ER, right? So how can we do that with improved communication? So it's a little tidbit and advice there. Do you want to go with sustainability, Ishan?
Sure. So the challenge with managing this program over time is it does require legitimate operational capacity as well as management time. This is not a program that you can run as a side project at scale, right? So oftentimes what we see is organizations can manage a relatively effective program up to, call it 80 to 100 patients. But once you hit that point, it becomes very, very challenging to consistently manage a program that drives, to Stuart's point, quality care while maintaining reimbursement and ROI above that, right? You just have too many moving parts. There's too many things to keep track of for each patient. And it becomes very, very burdensome, specifically to make sure you're maintaining compliance and keeping track of time correctly. Again, it really just depends on the EHR that you have, the process that you use, et cetera. But we have rarely seen organizations that can do this on their own without devoting significant management and operational oversight past 100 patients. And again, it's just like any other service line you have, right? The larger it gets, the more complex it becomes, the more moving parts there are, the more time you as an organization will have to devote to it. And candidly, what we've seen is very few organizations do have the management or operational bandwidth to dedicate the time necessary to scale the program beyond 100 patients. The last part as it relates to sustainability is ultimately quality over time. Remember, this is a program that patients can choose to participate in or choose to take themselves out of at any moment. And in the event, as an example, you scale past 100 patients, your team starts to get spread thin, maybe things start to slip through the cracks, you will inadvertently have patients that get a less than ideal experience and they will churn. So maintaining quality, not just through, again, one phone call a month or doing chart review, but really making sure you are performing patient-centered chronic care management for not just one patient, but every single patient that's in your program, Again, the larger your program becomes, the harder it becomes for an individual or a team of individuals to do that on their own, again, without having a significant amount of operational oversight or management bandwidth provided to them.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. And, just to run through those things real quick, and we've gotten a few other great questions since we started talking about that. Alan, you asked about the price of our product. I think we could follow up with you on that one-on-one if you're interested in hearing about that. Stuart,
yeah, I was just piggybacking on that. We do custom financial analysis, and we're happy to schedule one-on-ones to just walk further through your clinic, the software, and again, custom financial analysis that'll be built out to you guys. Just kind of depends clinic to clinic, state to state, things like that. But I'm happy to set that up. I did see you had a couple other questions. Happy to jump into though. I think the first one, I wrote them down here. How does RPM and CCM play off of each other, or do they play off of each other well? So it's a really good question for a multitude of reasons. So the short answer is, do they play off of each other well? Absolutely. To go a little bit deeper though, RPM is still a little bit of the wild, wild west in the sense that it's very new. The reimbursements for this year were actually decreased by 2%. So that means CMS maybe isn't seeing exactly what they want to get out of it. And there's a lot of moving parts from, what devices do we want to choose? Do we want Wi-Fi? Do we want Bluetooth? Things like that, the tracking. And it's still very much dependent on the patient following through and doing what they're supposed to be doing. So there's a lot of challenges there. What we'll typically see is we recommend that you launch with a CCM program first, and you really build out the line of communication. One, especially for this year, CCM reimbursements have skyrocketed 54%. So they went from somewhere around about like $42 to an average of about $65 for that original 20 minutes. But once you build out the lines of communication and you get a lot of patients enrolled, then you can then roll out RPM. And it's easier to get more patients involved in RPM once you have the communication channel built out from CCM. But you can bill for both of them in the same month. I don't know how many of our clients do that, but I would say a decent amount are definitely doing it. And the telehealth, I'm not sure if you can see this, Ishan. So he was asking, how is telehealth integrated in the billing component of CCM? Because I know there's some moving parts there.
So, and let me see, I'm trying to pull up the...
It's in the chat, not the Q&A.
Okay, got it. How is RPM and telehealth integrated in the billing component of CCM? So I'll have to, let me speak to it at a high level, and then Alan, if you want to add additional context, if I don't cover what you're asking, I'm happy to go into it in more detail. I think, so there are a variety of different ways that you can leverage telehealth in conjunction with CCM. The biggest one that we've seen as a byproduct of the shift in telehealth with COVID is that patients they crave additional interaction with their providers outside of televisits. Because whether perceived or not, a televisit is not the same for most patients who have been going to providers that, physically their entire life. So the first point is chronic care management is a natural extension of telehealth services, because the core feeling that many patients have is telehealth is reducing the amount of care that they are receiving. CCM is a great complement to that telehealth process, where you can essentially tell the patient, yeah, you might be, for example, seeing me just through a screen, but you can now text my team at any time. And in the event you have a need, we can get you scheduled for a same-day appointment through televisits almost immediately, right? And we have groups that have practitioners within their organization who keep portions of their schedule clear for same-day CCM patient appointments for patients that maybe are dealing with a complex or acute issue that needs additional triage, but maybe doesn't warrant, a true face-to-face visit. They just go ahead and schedule a televisit for a 15-minute check-in and then kind of decide it from there. So the short response there is CCM complements telehealth, much like telehealth complements CCM, right? You can think of CCM as an extension of your telehealth practice if you all have a high rate of telehealth visits within your group. I think the next question, just in building off of that, Alan, regarding groups that are taking on risk, short answer is absolutely. We have a few clients, particularly more towards the enterprise side, that are either partially at risk or fully at risk for the patient panels that we help them to serve. And a lot of the work that we do with them is on things like monitoring and closing health gaps, helping with HEDIS measures, creating trending indicators for patients that might be at higher risk of hospitalization or readmission, a lot of different things in regards to risk stratification and enablement for clients that are at risk. Alan, I hope that helps. If there's additional detail you want to provide, feel free to add it, and we can revisit it if you like.
Great. Go ahead, Stuart.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I know all three of us, Ishan, Ben, and myself, we're happy to stay on, an additional, 30 minutes or so. We blocked it off, but we know that the original lunch and learn, right, Ben, I believe was for 30 minutes. So
yeah, so we're about 5 past now, but we can continue to stay on for a few more minutes here and answer questions if people are able to stay on as well. And if you have to go, certainly understand. And we'll be following up to everyone. We'll be sending out a recording of this so you can watch the back half if you want to. If you can't stay, and also we'll be sending out some other materials like this deck that I have up on the screen right now. We've gotten a couple of questions here about other questions about time measurement and from Coleman and Sam that I think are sort of related here. So Coleman asks for asynchronous forms of communication like SMS and email, how is that time measured? And Sam asks, in terms of selecting the reason for recorded time, what is the difference between medication reconciliation and medication management oversight? So what's sort of a broad question there, a very specific one. Does someone, Ishan, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, let me just answer them in order of how they're received. So Coleman, as it relates to asynchronous forms of communication, on our end, our system has a variety of different technologies in it that enable the monitoring and tracking of the time that's spent within the account. Generally, what we find across a variety of different studies that we've performed is an average, right, assuming across an entire month, a blended average time spent per message is right around a minute pretty consistently for both messages sent and messages received, right? And so this involves, for example, the review of the message, the crafting of a response, the potential need for going into a patient chart, et cetera. Obviously, some messages, they're going to be very, very quick yes responses. Others might take, even up to 10 minutes to craft and response. But on a blended average, what we see generally is that both messages sent as well as received take approximately 1 minute per message. And again, in our system, there are a variety of different activity-based measurements that are performed and recorded in the back end that help attribute time to the messages themselves. Sam, as it relates to recording time for the difference between something like a medication reconciliation versus medication management oversight, as it relates to chronic care management, it really is just dependent on the amount of time that you spend performing those two different activities, right? On our end, it is difficult for us to provide a general recommendation of time, right? Because in your case, you might have some medication reconciliation activities that require a significant amount of chart review, lab review, coordination with a provider, and then follow up with a patient, just as an example. That might take 20 minutes. That might be your full activity for that month. Versus something just as an oversight might just only take you about 2 to 5 minutes. Again, it's highly dependent on the activity that is performed and the level of detail that you provide within your note. So on our end, it's difficult for us to provide kind of a standard difference in time allocation between the two. It's dependent on how much time is spent and the level of effort performed.
I think one thing we can add to that, though, from a more broad stroke perspective, is there's two parts of CCM. There's all the clinical work that you guys do on a day-to-day basis, right? That is billable under CCM. The second part of CCM is reaching out to the patients, being proactive, communicating with them, right? And CCM is a combination of both. And when we look at all of our clients, because we got data behind everything that we're doing, we find that clinical work gets most of our clients to, on average, 10 to 12 minutes per patient for the month. And then the other half is the communication aspect. Sometimes a medication reconciliation might take 20 minutes for one patient, but on average, we see that the clinical activities that are being done for a patient take up about 10 to 12 minutes, and then the rest is outgoing communication.
Great. Thanks, guys. That was really, really comprehensive answers. For some folks, I'm not sure if you got a notification or not, but there were some questions here in the chat that we answered via text, typed in. So if you go and look at your answer there, you can see Ishan answered a few in there with some pretty detailed info. So, hopefully that's helpful. If you have any other follow-ups to the info he gave, feel free to type it into the Q&A, or again, you can raise your hand, and if you want to ask a question out loud, we can do it that way. Does anybody else have any other questions here that we said we'd stay on for another half hour if folks wanted to, so we have a little more time here, but if folks have any more questions, we'd be happy to take them. If not, perhaps we'll sort of move towards wrapping up. Oh no, we have a hand raised here from Alan. Here, I'm going to allow you to talk, Alan. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Okay, I think you're on with us.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I've worked on the full risk side with Medicare Advantage plan as a medical director, and as you know, you're on the fee-for-service side, although it really is the bridge toward value-based. And I think we're in agreement that CMS is on the road to full value-based systems as we go forward. And so in my questions, the gain sharing on the value side in terms of outcome is where your margin is, as opposed to a fee-for-service product. How do you guys see that moving in terms of boots on the ground where you are?
Got it. And Alan, as it relates to where we're moving, meaning our clients, how are they leveraging the system to achieve some of the value-based means that they need from a risk-taking standpoint, or would?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Sure. So we've seen it in a variety of ways. I mean, the simplest form that we have seen is where the goal of the program is not to your point, not to drive fee-for-service, but to help close care gaps and closely monitor patients to avoid unnecessary expenditure and high cost utilization. And so with groups such as yours that are more on the value-based side, that are more forward-thinking, the goal is more of a true partnership in the way in which care is delivered to achieve your value-based goals based on what your contracts have. And for groups that we work with that are more on the full risk side, it is much more of a partnership than it is just hey, here's the product, Here's how you use it. Here are the processes that you go through to drive fee for service. Because in your case, it's a much longer process before you all actualize that revenue and those bonus payments. So the short answer on it is, it's more of a partnership where we strategically look at what you need to achieve over time and the areas that you believe are not necessarily your best in competency. And then we strategically design the process and the program and the workflows around CCM best practices and principles, right? But the goal is quality improvement over time, care gap closure over time, reduce cost, and therefore significant bonus payment for you all in the end.
Sure, and that's the common final pathway for us all, no matter which end of the spectrum we're working from. I'm not right now. I'm with the group that is working to take smaller practices, providing them with some infrastructure and the ability to move from fee for service into some depending on their resources, some risk, and then gain sharing on the outcome side, which CMS is making that obviously a lot easier as opposed to a full ACO or a full MA program.
Correct.
So this is very interesting from my perspective, because sometimes, you go past this and I'm a doc, so I'm, a little bit egocentric. So I'm past this in terms of, and now I'm old, doc, so I've lost some of that life part. But moving toward a full risk program, we know it works. I mean, my gosh, we moved our readmission rate from 16% down to 7% with just high touch and Vivify. We had 80 patients on Vivify, which is remote patient monitoring. So and it makes it a whole lot easier to do what we do best as providers and clinicians, as opposed to the validation that we've been sort of the burden of validating all of the fee process that as opposed to focusing on the outcome. So I mean, we're on the same track, just moving with different population sectors in terms of provider group.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to talk to you guys more after this. I don't want to take up everybody else's time here.
Sure. Yeah, we'd love to. I think, Alan, the one point I do
for sure. We can, Stuart.
Ben, if I can, just really quickly. So the partial risk model that you just identified, Alan, is very interesting, right? Where or for groups that you mentioned that you are working with groups to help transition them from a fee-for-service environment to a value-based future. We kind of, as you mentioned before, CCM is CMS's clear indication that value-based care is the future. And in some ways, it's almost like a training ground for providers and practitioners to go from fee-for-service to value-based care, right? So as an example, good chronic care management, when practiced correctly, is good value-based care. And what we work with our clients on, especially those that are moving towards a risk-sharing model, is how do you implement the ongoing processes and practices necessary to improve quality outcomes over time, but do it in a fee-for-service environment where you essentially are using the reimbursement that the Medicare is giving you as a subsidy for learning how to drive value-based care, right? Where the activity itself is reimbursed, and then the outcomes will follow after you learn how to do it correctly, right? And so you can think of CCM as a bridge, to your point, to that truly value-based model with the groups that you're transitioning in that way.
Absolutely, totally agree, and that's why I'm so interested in what you're doing. And obviously, the biggest, once you get your outcomes where you want them, that's where your bigger margins are. I mean, you take an asthmatic and keep them out of the hospital or the ED for a couple times, it far surpasses any reimbursement you get from a fee-for-service contract. So yeah, no, I absolutely agree with what you just said and see it. And it's going to be interesting to see how things progress. And it's the understanding, the learning curve for the provider as they look at this a little bit differently. I mean, when we talk about coding and risk, eyes glaze over.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but in reality, it really is looking at matching the right resource for the right need. And when you look at risk and you look at the resources available, and then the population sector, population health, I mean, docs get it. And when you put the incentives in aligned fashion, they'll go down that pathway, and we'll get better outcomes. We'll get better quality, get more efficient quality, and get our resources allocated to the right in the right sector.
Absolutely. Yeah, Alan, I think there's a ton that we can talk about on this end as a follow-up.
But definitely thank you for bringing that up. I will say that's one of the least spoken about points when CCM comes up is, yes, there's benefits that are driven out of it, but once you start learning the right processes of how to do this sort of model, there are so many areas that you actually start seeing an increase in revenue just across the board. And I think when people are just learning about CCM, they don't really understand that side of it. They're just looking at, I can bill for 99490 and I can get that 20 minutes and get that original reimbursement. But there is so many benefits that come beyond that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. I think you bring up some really good sort of specific points here about that we hear a lot from people in your position and different practices who are sort of in various stages of CCM, even if they're sort of already doing it. There's a couple of questions here that I just wanted to answer real quick, sort of about just follow-up and what have you. Jaxandria asks if we're going to send out the recording. We are. Everybody who's attended here will send out a video so you can rewatch. We'll send the deck. Sam asked for more resources to stay updated with CCM guidelines, get current information. We can follow up with you and anyone on that. If you go to family.com, there's a resources section. You can sort of see some info there, or if you just want to, I have your question here. We have all the questions downloaded, so maybe I'll be able to send you a few things, Sam, specifically. And anybody else has anything they're looking for, of course, reach out to us. We want to sort of keep this conversation going, and we're also planning to do more of these. They've been such a success to the two that we've done so far. Last week and this week, people have been so great bringing questions. And I think it sort of shows, that there's sort of a need out there for a place for people to discuss CCM, and we're really happy to sort of be able to provide that. So really appreciate everyone participating in this. I'm not sure if we have any other questions here. Otherwise, we might wrap up. Did someone else want to raise their hand if you have one more, and we can and we might have time for one more. If not, we could wrap up here. All right. Well, let's. I think we can call it a day. We already went about 20 minutes over time. So thanks so much, everyone, for coming. And as I said, we'll be sending a follow-up. And if you want to reach out to us, me, Stuart, or we can also, Ishan's works with our clients too. So, we want to stay in touch. We want to answer people's questions. So thanks for coming, and we hope to see you at another one of these soon.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for your time.